Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take complex research, strip away all the jargon, and really give you the knowledge that matters. So today, we're focusing on something that's, well, it's a massive global issue. How does wildlife actually survive when we humans carve up their habitat? I'm talking about intensive agriculture, urbanization.
Yeah, it's a story that's playing out literally everywhere. But the source material you brought today gives us this incredible focused look right at the local level.
Right.
We're diving into a community of 6 sympatric breeding bird species. And sympatric just means they're all living and trying to reproduce in the exact same place.
And that place is the grasslands of Inner Mongolia, China, which are being, rapidly modified by humans.
Exactly. They're all fighting for space.
So our mission for this deep dive is pretty clear. We want to figure out the rules of coexistence. I mean, how do 6 competing bird species, and some of them are really picky specialists, others are flexible generalists, how do they navigate this landscape? We need to unpack the mechanics of their habitat choices and, maybe most importantly, this idea of niche overlap.
And the stakes are just monumental. I mean, this study really highlights a brutal global trend we're seeing. Specialist species, the ones that need those pristine, specific environments, they're declining so much faster than the adaptable generalists.
So if we can understand why the specialists in this particular place are holding on or why they're failing, that's knowledge we can apply everywhere.
It is. It's critical conservation knowledge.
Okay, let's unpack this. And to do that, we absolutely have to start with the foundational idea that drives this entire study. The ecological niche.
Right, the ecological niche. It can sound a bit abstract, but it's such a core concept in ecology. And the researchers here, they relied on what's called the classic Hutchinsonian concept.
Okay, so this isn't about like a literal hole in a tree or a specific nest site.
No, exactly. Think of it more like a set of completely non-negotiable requirements for that species to survive.
They use this term, the n-dimensional hypervolume. Can we maybe ditch the math for a second and just make that concrete for you listening?
Absolutely. Yeah, let's do that. Think of it like a huge personalized checklist, or maybe a space that's defined by every single resource and condition that a species needs to survive and reproduce.
So like temperature, water, the type of insects it eats.
Exactly. If a bird needs, say, tall grass for cover, specific seeds, a certain temperature range, and access to water, those 4 things form the dimensions of its unique survival space. The n-dimensional hypervolume is just the total space you get when you plot all of those dimensions together.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's the absolute maximum possible living space a species could theoretically live in.
It is. And within that, the study zooms in on 2 really crucial measurements.
Which are?
First, you have niche breadth. And that's just the extent of that ecological space the species actually uses.
So Generalist has a wide breadth.
A very wide breadth. It uses a huge variety of food, shelter, different conditions.
Yeah.
But a specialist, its breadth is really narrow. It only uses a tiny little sliver of that potential space.
And the second measurement is niche overlap.
Which is just what it sounds like. It's where the checklists, the requirements of species A and species B intersect.
Okay, and this is where competition happens.
Precisely. If 2 species' needs overlap perfectly, classical ecology, specifically something called the competitive exclusion principle, it says they can't persist together. One's going to eventually outcompete the other.
So to avoid that, they have to do what's called resource partitioning.
Right. They find ways to use the same area, but maybe at different times, or they eat slightly different things, or use different nesting materials, anything to reduce that direct competition.
So the theory is solid. Specialists are picky, generalists aren't. Let's see how that holds up when you map it onto the real world. This research was done over 5 years, from 2020 to 2024, in an area that's just seeing this explosion of agricultural conversion.
And they focused on 6 bird species that are really common there. It's a great mix, which lets them compare these different strategies directly.
So who are the main players here?
Well, first you have your 3 confirmed generalists. These are the flexible survivors. You've got the tree sparrow, which everyone knows can adapt to cities and farms.
Sure.
Then the Eurasian magpie, probably the ultimate opportunistic omnivore, and the barn swallow, a really mobile insect eater.
Okay, and who are their specialist competitors?
These are the 3 ground nesting larks, and they're all very similar, both in how they look and how they behave, which means, they should be intense competitors.
Right.
You got the Eurasian skylark, the Mongolian lark, and the Asian short-toed lark. And these birds, they all rely on very specific grassland structures for everything.
So the researchers collected, a dizzying amount of data on the environment, right? Things like plant height, cropland ratios, all that.
Oh, a ton. And to keep from just drowning in all that information, they used a really powerful statistical tool. It's called Principal Component Analysis, or PCA. And what does that do exactly?
PCA is fantastic.
Yeah.
It takes all these original variables, in this case 11 of them, and it boils them down into just a few independent concepts. It finds the main patterns.
So it simplifies the picture.
Hugely. They managed to capture over 76% of all the habitat variation in just 3 main gradients. They call them principal components, or PCs. And these PCs, they basically define the axes of the bird's ecological world in Inner Mongolia.
Let's break those 3 down then. PC1, the most important one, was all about fragmentation.
Yes. But instead of just listing correlations, let's think of PC1 as the messiness index.
A messiness index. I like that.
Yeah, so a low score on PC1 means you have this large, continuous, undisturbed habitat, a big core area. A high score means the landscape is a total mess. It's fragmented, chopped up by roads and fields into these little confusing patches with lots of edges.
So the difference between a pristine field and an agricultural checkerboard.
Exactly that.
Okay, much clearer. What about PC2? PC2 is the degradation index, or just habitat quality. A high score on PC2 means the habitat is poor. We're talking lots of bare ground, low plant cover, not much richness, just sparse, dusty grassland.
Got it. And the last one, PC3.
That's the land use gradient. It's simple. It just runs from maximum natural grassland on one end, which is a high PC3 score, to maximum cropland on the other, a low PC3 score. It separates the natural fields from the farms.
Okay, so now we can see the battleground. Here's where it gets really interesting. When they start mapping the species onto these stress points, the results show just massive differences, especially along that first axis, the messiness index, PC1.
The contrast here is genuinely staggering. The specialists, especially the Mongolian lark and the Eurasian skylark, they are so risk-averse. They only showed up where habitats were large and connected.
Yeah.
Low PC1.
Undisturbed.
Completely. The Mongolian lark in particular, it relies on those huge, pristine landscapes, and it absolutely will not tolerate those messy, fragmented areas.
But the generalists, they did the opposite. The tree sparrow actually seems to prefer the change.
It does. Its occurrence went up in more fragmented habitats.
Yeah.
It finds opportunity in the exact places that scare the larks away. It's adapting to this new reality we're creating.
Now, looking at the other gradients, even the generalists have their limits. The barn swallow showed a really big negative response to that degradation index, PC2.
Yeah, that high bare ground and low plant cover.
Yeah.
It just makes the habitat unusable, even for a bird that eats on the wing. There's just not enough insect life there. And while the Eurasian skylark showed a preference, it was a borderline significant tendency for more natural grassland.
High PC3.
Right. The magpie and the tree sparrow showed almost no response to PC3 at all. They really just don't care if it's natural grassland or farmland.
Which just underlines how much of a generalist they really are. They survive by just being indifferent to it.
What's fascinating here is when you look at the niche breadth itself, and it largely confirmed what we'd expect. Generalists have much larger niches.
And the biggest of all.
The Eurasian magpie. It had a median breadth of 342. That is a huge ecological space. It reflects its ability to live anywhere from a remote field to, a busy city park.
And on the other end, the most specialized was the Mongolian lark.
Predictably, yes. It had the smallest niche with a median of just 124. It is so ecologically constrained. It's totally dependent on just a few perfect conditions.
Okay, but hang on. There's an anomaly here I want to dig into. We called the barn swallow a generalist, right?
Right.
But the data showed its niche breadth was 271, which is surprisingly narrower than the specialist Eurasian skylark, which was 291. That just seems to fly in the face of the definition.
It does.
Why would a bird that flies everywhere and eats all sorts of insects be more constrained than a ground nesting lark?
And that, right there, that's where the real insight of the study lies. Because while the barn swallow is a habitat generalist for almost everything foraging migration, it has one non-negotiable, highly specialized requirement.
Its nesting site.
Its nesting site. It needs human buildings, barns, bridges, eaves of houses.
So that one specific need acts like a bottleneck.
An absolute bottleneck. It doesn't matter how flexible its diet is or how wide its foraging range is. If those specific human structures aren't there, the bird cannot reproduce. And that single requirement effectively shrinks the entire volume of its niche.
Wow. So specialization can be driven by just one crucial part of the life cycle. Okay, let's talk about the elephant in the room then, the overlap. The researchers found huge niche overlap, especially among those three larks. The Mongolian lark had a shocking 96.9% probability of occurring within the Eurasian skylark's niche.
That level of overlap, I mean, theoretically, it should lead to intense cutthroat competition, to competitive exclusion. But they're coexisting.
So they have to be partitioning resources somehow, on a level we haven't measured yet.
That's the conclusion. The answer isn't in those big gradients of fragmentation or habitat quality. It's in something far more subtle. The proposed mechanism is niche segregation along subdimensions.
Okay, so what does that mean?
It means the three larks, they look alike, they use the same overall habitat, but they must be dividing up the resources along very specific fine-scale axes. Maybe it's the height of grass tussocks, or a specific soil humidity, or maybe they're targeting different sizes of insects.
So they're effectively sharing the same large apartment building, but they're living on different floors and ordering from slightly different menus.
That is a perfect analogy, yes.
Yeah.
And the key piece of evidence comes right back to that fragmentation gradient, PC1.
The messiness index.
Right. Even with that 97% overlap, the researchers found a crucial difference in tolerance. The density distribution of the Mongolian lark along PC1 was much narrower, and it declined far more sharply than the other larks.
Meaning it's way less tolerant of any kind of disturbance.
Significantly less tolerant. So while they share this potential living space, the Mongolian lark's realized niche, the space it actually uses to survive, is much smaller and more separate. That subtle difference in environmental sensitivity is likely what allows three very similar species to all persist in the same area.
So what does this all mean? I mean, the core conclusion for conservation seems crystal clear. Habitat generalists like the tree sparrow and the magpie, they have these huge, flexible niches. They can handle fragmentation. They'll probably be fine.
They'll survive.
But the specialists, like the Mongolian lark, they absolutely require us to protect large, connected, undisturbed patches of grassland. We need agricultural practices that can somehow balance the needs of both of these groups.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this study just powerfully emphasizes the challenge we face. Trying to truly measure the full n-dimensional niche is incredibly hard. Those three big habitat gradients gave us the broad strokes, the difference between a gourmet chef and a fast food eater.
Right.
But they didn't capture the entire complex story of coexistence among those larks.
Which leaves us with a provocative thought for you to consider long after this deep dive ends. The study suggests that while we can track broad changes like fragmentation, to truly understand the survival of these vulnerable specialists, we have to go microscopic. We need to use tools like high-accuracy GPS loggers or dietary isotope analysis to see the environment on an unprecedentedly fine scale. So what unseen subdimension of that environment? Is it the perfect soil density for a beetle larva or a specific flowering plant? What is the single crucial requirement that is ensuring the delicate survival of a highly vulnerable specialist like the Mongolian lark? That is the next great puzzle in conservation biology.